Hey everybody, and welcome along to the second Rock Your Brand webinar. And we have a very special guest today, and I've been really excited about it, and I'm really nervous today about it. We have Mark Schaefer with us.
Please.
No, honestly, I'm really nervous. We have Mark Schaefer with us today. Mark is a best-selling author, podcaster, business consultant, all-round super nice guy, and we'll go into that later because Mark's helped me out as well in more ways than one. And Mark has, well, I would say recently, but it's been a couple of months now, Mark has a new book out called Known, which we're going to talk about briefly today because Mark has talked it to death, and Mark is ready to move on, I feel, to Pastor's View and his seventh book, I'm sure. Mark, would you like to sort of just introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, I am a subject of Cara, Queen of Scotland, who is on the call here today, as we all are, of course. No, thank you. I mean, it was a nice introduction. I guess in my heart, I'm really a teacher. When it was years and years ago, when my daughter was a little girl, I was helping her with her homework. And she said, "Daddy, why don't you be a teacher someday? Because when I go to school, I get so confused. And when you explain it, I can understand it." So I think my gift is I'm good at explaining things. And in my life, the people that I looked up to were the people who could take very complex concepts and distill them to the essence. And maybe that's part of my gift too. So really, whatever I do, in my speeches, in my blog posts, in my books, it's all about really teaching and helping people.
Yeah, I think that comes across quite well in Known, and people reaching out to you because they obviously read your content and feel that you can help them as much as the content is helpful. I think you give across a persona that you're willing to take someone's question, and I think you said as well that you're quite flattered when people reach out to you for help. You know, I think when people ask me, reach out to me, it feels quite flattering when they do that. And I think you have quite a teacherly way about you, I suppose. It's you have quite a soft way of speaking, and I've been told that about the way I talk as well. And that's something which I'll touch on through the call is. That's something that the book has kind of led me more into the path because the book has, your book Known has, it's basically 4 steps to finding out your own personal brand. And I know you say in the book you don't really like the term personal brand, but I think I watched you on a webinar yesterday, and I think you said it was all that you could think of at the time. You couldn't think of anything better.
I couldn't think of anything better. And it's today, the thing that I don't like about the term personal branding is that it's just been beat up into what, people hate, it's yucky, it's icky, it seems narcissistic. But, the way the world works today, it's essential. I mean, and whether you want a brand or not, you have one, because the brand is what people think of you. It's their cumulative experiences with you. And so I think we're much better off being intentional about how we craft that brand, how we show up to others, because it's part of the grease in the machine of how the world works today. And it's an important tool in our toolbox. And I think we do need to be intentional. So whatever you want to call it, our presence on the web, we need to have the reputation, the authority, the right type of presence to get our job done, whatever that is, whether we're trying to build a business, whether we're trying to get a speaking invitation, whether we're trying to raise money for a charity. People who are known are going to have an advantage over people who aren't known. And what I'm just begging people to do through the book is just make a plan. Be intentional about it. Think it through rather than just react to things.
Yeah, I think I was very guilty of being reactionary rather than having a plan. I have had a plan for a little while, but it's not been a great plan. I had an end goal, but hadn't really sort of structured it out, and the book's been really good for that. And I just spotted that we've been joined by another celebrity, Mr. John Esperian, who is also in the book, has joined us.
He's in the book. He was one of my guinea pigs.
Yeah, and it's funny actually because John had mentioned in the Content Marketing Academy group that we're in, we had a very brief discussion yesterday about people who talk about personal branding and how it can all be the same. Everyone says the same thing, and it's starting to get a little bit convoluted now because everyone seems to be a personal branding expert. And I think it's got to the point now, it's completely waterlogged and it's turning people off. And as you say, it's become mucky, it's become messy. And I think we need someone clever to come up with a way of discussing it without it being a bit of a turn off. I think content marketing has gone down that route as well. I think it's, become, when it gets to a point where it's hit the public consciousness, that's probably when it becomes oversaturated. So it's good that your book didn't kind of go down the route of reteaching everything that so many other people are saying. And that's
I think I did take a new path. I think it's a very practical path. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book. I did a tremendous amount of research before I decided to even write the book. And it's just, there's just a lot of just raw rainbows and unicorns out there. And that's
fluffy.
It's fluffy. And it's just not the way the world works today. So, I just became obsessed with trying to find something that's practical and that really works.
Yeah, no, it is the fluffiness is kind of what puts people off. I think you could listen to a lot of people talking about personal brands and not take anything actionable away from it. Mm-hmm. Just, here's what a personal brand is, and the bit about just take your passion and run with it is kind of the no structure approach that you're talking about. And when people fail, they go, "But that's what I love. Why isn't it working? Why does no one buy from me?" So having the 4 steps to go through is quite good. One of the things which I wanted to kind of ask you was, you say in the book, decide on how much humanity you want to put into your brand. And I suppose a criticism I've had of mine is that I give too much. I'm far too personal and give too much away, and that it could almost be detrimental, warts and all, kind of saying, it's good to show a little bit, but if you give everything, then where does business start and personal end? What would you kind of say to how much you should give?
Well, if you're a business person and you're trying to build a business through your connections on the web, you're always on. You're always on. And everything you say and everything you don't say becomes part of your brand. Everything you do and everything you don't do becomes part of your brand. And, there are people out there, I haven't followed you long enough, I guess, to see all the warts and all. So I don't know, to what extent you're throwing stuff out there. But I mean, some people, they talk about their depression and they talk about their addictions. And, if you're trying to be therapeutic through creating this content and you're out there to try to set an example for others, that's fine. But if you're trying to build an accounting business, all things being equal, I would rather hire an accountant who is not an alcoholic and depressed. And that may sound harsh, but that's the way the world works. I mean, I want to build, if I want to hire someone for a personal service, or to hire a building contractor, or to hire a lawyer, or to hire someone to help me with my content, I don't want to hire an addicted alcoholic who's depressed. I don't. And, because there's lots of choices. I mean, there's lots of choices out there. Mm-hmm. So what I encourage people to do is just be intentional. don't just react. Think about what is the presence I want to have in the world, and be intentional about it. I wrote a blog post recently about being strategically authentic. And what I mean by that is I think it's fair that people should want to know about you. They want people do business with those that they know, they like, and they trust. So I don't think you need to be a blank slate or a blank piece of paper. I think we do need to show our humanity. I think we do need to bring our story. And there's not saying that if you've suffered in your life, if you've gone through addictions in your life, that can't be part of your story. But be intentional about it, knowing that everything you do and everything you don't do, that makes up your persona. That's what people are going to know about you and think about you. So, feel what you feel, but choose what you say. Yeah. is kind of, my view of the world. And I mean, I don't like sharing a lot about my family and stuff, because honestly, it's a little creepy sometimes. A lot of people know me, and it's weird because I'll have a picture of me and my wife, and then all these people start following my wife, and it just gets a little creepy.
I could see that.
But about every 4 to 6 weeks, I post a picture of me with my wife, because I want to show one of my values is I'm a happily married person. And that's something that, that's part of my value. It's part of who I am. I do work in the community. I don't talk a lot about it but maybe every 4 to 6 weeks, I'll post a picture of me, maybe doing some work in my community, because that's important to me. It's part of who I am. It's part of my values. So, I'm not spilling my guts all the time, but I'm showing what are my values, because that's how people get to know me and respect me and hopefully trust me.
Yeah, I think, there's not much to add there, but I think it's, for me, I think it's about, if I try to be something else, which I'm not, that becomes hard work, because you're constantly wearing a mask.
You can't do that. And I'm not suggesting that. Yeah. Because that's exhausting and it's not sustainable.
Yeah. And I think, there's been a few people that I've followed who the mask has slipped a few times, and you instantly lose the trust with them, because you think, okay, you're trying to be something, which has pulled me in, because that's what attracts me to your personal brand or whatever. But then when they're having to churn out consistent content, they can't keep it up, and it slips, and people can spot it a mile off when it happens, that the authenticity that you thought they had isn't authentic at all. And so that's kind of one of the things where going through the book and trying to find my space. I think I'll just quickly run through the 4 steps. The 4 steps are: find your place, determine your space, find your fuel, and create an actionable audience. Now, the first 2, I was pretty sure I was there, but then I read the book and I thought, I've not gone in enough. I've not niched down enough to find sort of that space, because I'm a graphic designer, I'm a brand designer. There's a lot of people out there.
It's harder than people think. I mean, it really, and that's why, it's fine to have a passion. It's fine to have something that you love. It's fine to have a dream, but I'm encouraging people to also have a plan. I was talking to a lady a few days ago, and she was struggling with some of these things. And so I said, well, what's your sustainable interest? She had been through the book, and she said, well, my thing is I want to encourage businesses to focus. And I said, that's not a sustainable interest. That's a blog post. Or, and again, one of the things I talk about in the book is that this has to go on a long period of time. On average, the people that are featured in the book, it took them 2.5 years to really start accruing those benefits. I would have loved to have written a book, 100 Days to a Powerful Personal Brand. It's not there. It doesn't happen. It takes work. There is no shortcut. And that's one of the things why I think a lot of the rah-rah gurus out there are misleading people, because, I talked to almost 100 people who've become known in their fields all around the world, and you have to do the work. And so when I started helping this lady, I said, are you going to be able to write about being focused for 30 months? You have to have a 30-month mindset. I'm in this for 30 months because on average, that's what it takes to really have your brand tip. And she said, well, no. And what we really started to explore, I said, well, what makes you come alive? What kind of feedback are you getting from your customers? And what we came up with is that she really helps small business owners with kind of hacks to find the time to do this stuff, because they're overloaded and they have to take care of their accounting and their marketing. And now you got to do social media on top of that, and you got to create content. And so she started talking about all these like shortcuts and stuff. I said, well, that's sustainable. That's something you can write about forever. And it just, boom, the light went on. And she's, and 24 hours later, she's like changing her website to reflect this new thing, because that is something she can be known for in her. And she's just shooting for her geographic region, basically her province in Canada. That's, that's basically what she wants to be known for. And so that's very doable. That's very sustainable. So you do have to do the work. I mean, John Aspirian and I had the same conversations when he was kind of starting out, to try to think, what's his niche? What does he want to be known for? What's sustainable? And you got to put a little time, you got to put a little effort into that. You got to do a little research. What's already out there? What are your competitors doing? What can you own? And you do need to love it. It doesn't necessarily have to be your passion. Sometimes instead of following your passion follows you. I don't know if you guys have heard of a guy named Roger Dooley. He has a blog about neuromarketing, and he loves it. He's passionate about it. But he started out as a web and SEO guy. And one day his daughter came back from college with a book about neuropsychology. And he started flipping through this. He said, this is so interesting. This can be applied to business. And he did a little research. Nobody was writing anything about this. He bought up some URLs. He started writing about it. Now, 10 years later, he's written books about it. He speaks about it. He goes to conferences. This is what he's known for, and he loves it. But he didn't grow up as a little boy thinking, oh, I'm going to be the expert on neuromarketing. The passion followed him, and that's perfectly okay.
So sometimes it's not a plan. It's just how it evolves.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Because I mean, I've been a graphic designer for 20 years now, and it's in a way it can be quite scary when you start to look at your niche and your passions and what you think you could do, because it can lead you down a path which is quite far away from what you've just spent 20 years doing. So you're almost going, right, well, I've done the research and it's showing me that if I continue to go down this path, it's going to be incredibly difficult to become known. Whereas
I had a story in the book where I gave a talk about this, and a guy came up to me after my talk. He said, I've been working on this for 4 years and I'm not getting anywhere. And in the first 10 minutes of your talk, I knew what I was doing wrong, because there's too many other people doing the exact same thing as me. They've been doing it longer. They've been doing it more, and I've got to find another space. I'm an expert in what I do, but I'm not connecting with people. I'm being overwhelmed by the amount of content in my niche. So, I mean, I think that's a great example, is that I'm completely confident in the path in the book. Mm-hmm. And I think for a lot of people, it is going to be a wake-up call to say, oh my gosh, I've just been kind of stumbling along on this path. I've never even thought about doing research on this. I've never even thought about looking at my competitors or refining what my sustainable interest is. I'm not sure I can even articulate it, but it's not too, I mean, the best time to change is right now.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Take the advice in the book and, and internalize it, because this is what works. This is what every single person who has, made it to the other side, without exception, this is what every person has done. And as I've gone on and I go through these interviews and I talk to other people, they say, yeah, that's exactly how it worked for me too.
Yeah, there's just it's amazing how everyone in that book can be linked together, going through the same path. And I'm quite confident that my path will be successful. I've looked at, I've done some research, and I've done the 4-box exercise to see where everybody is and what they're doing. And mine's is quite a saturated, well, not quite a saturated market. It's a hugely saturated market, the design side of things. But I think there's an awful lot of what we talked about, personal branding advocates. There's a lot of fluffy in my industry, and a lot of highbrow talking about branding, and not many people will take it to a lower level and discuss it on an everyman way of talking. And I've done a few things that you mentioned in the book. I've started public speaking, which is the most frightening thing in the world, for me anyway. And I've done a few talks now where I've taken branding and I've taken the terms but moved them into a space that everyone can understand. So I did one where I took how to create your brand for your business, but treat it as if it's a superhero. So you develop the power, the costume, and everyone got that. And it was a really fun talk to do because I had little quizzes about, who's this superhero? And it was great. And I had brilliant feedback from it. And that kind of was my sort of epiphany moment about branding. And Roger Edwards, who's a friend and is in the CMA, does a lot of talking about his industry and how jargon's used, and he's pretty much the king of getting rid of jargon in his industry, and his talks go well. So I'm almost following in Roger's footsteps, but doing it from a brand and design point of view. And having looked, there isn't much. I've now said it here, so I need to be careful. I need to get a move on before anyone else takes that up. But the book's really helped. Known has really helped me go through that, reading all the examples, consistency, which everyone talks about, but it's true. And the amount, I think what you have to just is keep grit, because there may be others doing the same as you, but they will give up. They will give up because they're not getting any traction, or they can't see traction. And I think it's an important point that you've made before, especially sort of like in your other books, about the amount of people that just lurk in the background. They are reading your content. They're just not clicking like or subscribe, but they are taking it on. And these are the ones that may reach out to you 2 years down the line and make that difference to your business, that one invite to talk or create your brand. And I was wanting to kind of quickly talk as well about numbers and how people get obsessed with how many likes they have. And you use a good example in the book, the Alyssa Milano one about her 3 million Twitter followers. And I just wonder if you could just quickly go over that, because I feel really sorry for the guys that wrote the book.
Well, I mean, the big point I make in the book is there's a difference between a social media audience and an actionable audience. And that's a big myth in business today, especially when it comes to this whole thing about influence marketing. They look at how many Twitter followers you have and they think, well, this person must know what they're doing. And Twitter is probably the least impactful social media channel that there is right now. And yet a lot of this influence marketing is based on Twitter because they have an available API that people can put into dashboards. But I mean, my most powerful platform is my blog. The people who read my blog, they subscribe to me, they listen to me. I'm part of the fabric of their lives. Some woman told me, I start my day with a cup of coffee in your blog. That I'm part of her life. But those sort of things aren't really reflected in a lot of these influence measurements. It's all Twitter based. And that's probably the worst view of what influence is all about. So what I go into the book is how to, again, it takes time, it takes patience, it takes commitment, it takes engagement to connect with people in a meaningful way, so that when it's time to sell something, or it's time to be a speaker at a conference, or it's time to sell a book, that, you know, it's truly actionable, that you can get them to do something. And you have to go the extra step. Social media and social media audience, they're weak relational links. They're not actionable. They're important because it opens a door. I mean, many of the people today, we first connected on Twitter, or maybe we connected on LinkedIn and Facebook, but we didn't know each other. And now over time, we've been commenting back and forth. Many of you I met in Scotland last year. We've had a drink together. We have fun together. And now, look, here's you and me, Call. Yeah. We're collaborating. We're creating content together. We're creating value together. And who knows over time where it may lead. I may hire you. You may hire me. And that, I mean, that I can point to a number of people on this call, John and John Asperian and Jonathan and several others here, where, you know, it's led to bigger and bigger relationships. They're actionable to me. I'm actionable to them. We're more than just a Twitter link, and that's where the focus needs to be.
Yeah, and I think to kind of, as you say, to build up that. There's Cara trying to sell sheds again. There needs to be, you do need to build up the actionable audience. And I think the thing about the Alyssa Milano thing was she had 3 million Twitter followers, and she tweeted out an Amazon link to a book, which she obviously had read and liked. And so the author of that book must have thought all the Christmases had come at once, 3 million people getting tweeted that link. And I do believe they didn't sell one book, according to your book, not one. So not 3 million tweets and not one book sold. So It just goes to show that you can have a lot of followers and likes, but it doesn't mean anything if you're not, if you've not built an audience which trusts you and your opinion on things, that they will then act upon it, the advice that you're giving them. So and that does take time, and it takes great content, consistent content over, as you say, 30 months. I'm 2.5 years into my reset, my clock reset, I suppose, from when I first met Chris Marr from the CMA. So I'm 2.5 years in, and I'm starting, my curve is very much flatline, and I'm now starting to see that curve hit, because I've been blogging now. I don't blog hugely consistently, maybe 1 or 2 a month. Video is kind of where I'm pushing my game into right now, and I'm getting a lot of traction. I got an email or a message from a teacher from a school in the United States who uses my videos to help teach her design class. You know, things like that.
Wow,
it doesn't make me any money, but that shows me that my content is good enough that other people are using it to teach with. And so that gives me confidence that I can deliver in a way which is constructive for video, and to keep going. And I want to help business people to understand branding and why it's important, and I need to do it at a certain level. Right now, the audience which I have seem to be designers and teachers, not the one which I'm kind of aiming my content at, but that's probably because my message isn't business focused, but I'm slowly moving into that because I've done all the core basics of design, and I'm now moving my message in. So I'm building up my actionable audience very slowly, but I think that that's not a bad way to do it. And you also mentioned in the book that if you want to build up your audience more quickly, there's kind of 2 main ways to do that, and you've touched on it already. One is to write a book and become an expert through that side of things, and public speaking. I swore, and Cara will kind of back this up, that I swore I would never write a book. I'm not a big fan of writing, and I now want to write a book. So I've kind of got some rough notes and outlines, and you also go in known, you run people how they could do the outlines of creating a book and stuff. But speaking as well. I swore I wouldn't do any speaking. And when I first met you last year at CMA in Edinburgh, was on the eve of my very first public speaking engagement at CMA. And I was...
That's why we were drinking.
Yeah, exactly. I was a nervous wreck. Long story short, Mark had posted up that he was outside the venue for CMA, and we were staying in an Airbnb just down the road. And I invited Mark to come up and have a drink with us, not expecting him to say yes, and he did. So Mark gave me some pearls of wisdom on speaking, and it's one of those things that you talk about. That poor unfortunate man you can't remember the name of in your book, who gave you the piece of advice, and I can't remember what that piece of advice was, but the piece of advice you gave to me was, no matter how nervous you are, when you come off that stage, you will feel, even if it went bad or good, the adrenaline and the surge of excitement from having done that talk, bottle that up. So when you feel nervous the next time, open the bottle and remember what that felt like before you go on stage. And I've never forgotten that. And I do that for every workshop now when I get nervous, and I've done a few other talks, and it's just been the best advice ever. It was really, really good. Oh, and I think you said as well, it's your job. Just treat it like you're going to work. Mm-hmm. Don't treat it like you're something special. It's just your day job. You're just giving people advice and help. So, all of that was coming back when I was going through the book, all of that knowledge that you'd given to me. And to talk about public speaking as well, you also say, you need to be an entertainer and not a teacher when you're doing the public speaking. And there's the quote from Steve Martin, be so good that they can't ignore you. And I think I will hold that to heart as well. When I'm doing that. So, I mean, the book's great. Everyone needs to buy the book. It doesn't matter if you are a sole trader or you're looking to, start a bigger business. You will need to find your niche. You will need to be known in order to get out there in your sector. So that's really important. But I think Mark, we had a quick discussion yesterday, and Mark was kind of not wanting to talk about his book too much because he was getting a bit tired of it, but maybe to open the wider subject of brand. And I think you said, Mark, you'd had a discussion about what is brand. So I wouldn't mind hearing about what that discussion was that triggered you to sort of want to talk about it today.
Well, there was, I think it was a Facebook discussion, and people are going back, what is a brand? And I have a good friend who I respect a lot, Mitch Joel. He runs a big agency in Canada, and he said that branding is really random. He says it's almost like waves in the ocean, and he said he said you just can't predict what's going to hit or what's not going to hit. And I disagree. I really disagree. That I think you can be intentional about branding. That branding, it's really kind of a collaboration between you or your company and the needs and the values of your audience. It's almost like becoming part of their audience, becoming a friend with them. And I think it is possible to see changes in the way that people want to do business, the way they relate in their life, the way they communicate in their life. And if you look at how brands are reinventing themselves or disrupting industries, it's because they're locking into some value that wasn't there before. So, I mean, Uber is kind of the great example of that, where, my generation, you owned a car. You just did. You aspired to own a car, and you wanted to have a really nice one. And today's generation, they're saying, why would we pay for something that just sits there most of the time? We want another way to travel. And so now Uber has become basically a collaboration with that mindset, with that value. And that's why it's so important to tap into what are the values of your specific audience? You know, I talk about in my book about finding your space. What is your space? Is it Scotland? Is it the UK? Is it the world? Is it a demographic? Is it an economic group? Is it a demographic group? Is it an age group? You know, and what keeps them up at night? What are their underserved wants? What are their underserved needs? That's where disruption is going to occur. That's where there's an opportunity to create new relationships and to create new connections of love between a company. I look at, we have this company in the United States called Panera Bread. And look, there have always been bakeries. There have always been coffee shops. But what Panera Bread tapped into is that people, I think they call it the third space. So the first space is your home. A second space might be a church or a school, but you need another gathering place. And so Panera Bread built these big places where you could get coffee and you could get different types of food in all during the day. And it was friendly and it was warm and they had Wi-Fi and you could come and gather, and people go there to do business and they do there to have little meetings. And it was more about the food, more than about the coffee. It was about creating the third space. They tapped their brand, tapped into an underserved want, an underserved need. And I think it's possible to do research and to find those ideas, to find those underserved wants and needs, and pivot and shift and create new value that will create new value for your brand. So I don't think it's random. I think, and sometimes, yes, sometimes it is luck. Sometimes a company will start something or a person will start something and not even know they're tapping into something new. Great.
Yeah.
But I think there also is an opportunity to listen, to really know what's going on, and to listen to what's going on. And I think Jonathan Patrick's on the call here. I think that's a great example. He started a new business to kind of unite startup businesses in the southern United States. I think there's a huge need for that. All the attention right now is on Silicon Valley and on Boston and New York and these different places in the world. And yet that power, I think, is disseminating, it's dispersing. And there's no reason today. You can get access to resources, you can get access to capital almost anywhere. And I think Jonathan is shining a light on startup businesses in his region of the world. I think he's been in that world a long time. He's sensing an underserved need. And I think that's how he can create a brand and how others can create a brand too. It's not just luck.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a lot of people out there who wish it was just luck. I think you've got to. I think as well with the way technology is moving as well. People would say some people would say that there's nothing for me to niche into. There's nothing that I can grasp onto. It's all been done before. But I think with the way technology is changing, there's doors opening all the time. As you say, if you research and if you keep abreast of everything which is happening, there's Facebook launching Spaces yesterday or the day before. And for me, I'm really excited to see what brands will do with VR. How will that change the interaction between a brand and its customers? What could you do? Yes, you could say, well, we'll use VR, but how will you use it? How will you use it to change your customer's life? What will make it easier? What will enhance it for them? And that's kind of a space which I'm really keen to look into. And one of the things which, taken from your book, where you say one of the things that you can do is you could curate content. I'm actually quite fascinated by how brands can work with VR. So I'm really keen, and have been doing since yesterday, looking at I've got a Google search set up, or Google notifications, I can't remember what it's called, to send me information whenever brand and VR are kind of mentioned on Google. And I'd quite like to curate some content around that and talk about how brands are utilizing VR and maybe become the go-to space to find out how brands are using VR. So that's kind of a niche that I could get into now whilst VR is really kicking off. With Facebook putting its full weight behind it.
Yeah, but okay. So let's explore that. I want to push back on you on this as a lesson. So your core business is connecting your content with small businesses, right? And maybe in your region of Scotland, or maybe all over Scotland, or maybe the UK. And one of the things you talked about is that you're connecting with teachers and you're connecting with people who aren't buying stuff from you. Mm-hmm. And I think it's, that's a common thing I see with a lot of people. And that might be a signal to reflect and say, a lot of people in my space, they market to marketers. They try to have a big clout score or something because they're marketing to marketers and they're not marketing to people who are actually buying something. So, I think you have to be focused, because creating content takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of time. It's a huge investment for your business. And I think you need to think about, am I creating the right kind of content for the people who are really going to buy from me? Mm-hmm. So something like virtual reality, that might be very interesting and might be intoxicating. It could be an opportunity for you. But if your true audience is small business people, are they really going to be interested in virtual reality? The answer to that is yes, 3 years from now or 4 years from now. So is it going to help you to create content about virtual reality? I don't know. Mm-hmm. But you need to really stay focused. And one of the things I talk about in the book is, well, this is one of the things I'm going to pick on John Asperian too. John was dedicated. He's created this amazing new newsletter. He's doing a great job with his writing, and he had this opportunity to do a podcast. And so, I don't know what John's ultimate decision was. I haven't heard, but my recommendation is, John, stay focused. You're really getting traction on this one thing, and every time we do something else, there's a cost to that. There's a cost to our business. There's a cost to our time. There's a cost to our families. So don't chase every shiny red ball. The wrong reason to start creating content is because somebody else is doing it, because someone else has a podcast. You have to build your audience, and you have to master one channel, whether it's video or whatever it is, and do it well. So before you switch into something that's like VR, well, that could be good, but don't do it because it's the shiny red ball. Do it because it's going to help you sell more stuff mm-hmm. to your audience. Because if you do it because you love it, you're going to be spending time doing something that doesn't sell more stuff necessarily.
Yeah.
I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying be intentional about it. Mm-hmm. Make it part of the plan.
Yeah, I just need to go through the workbook, go through the known workbook and see if it's, comes out the other end as something which is viable. If it's not, just, the shiny red ball thing, people that know me will know I am constantly chasing a shiny red ball. So I need to reel myself in a little bit with that.
That, and I don't want you to beat yourself up on that, because that's a problem that so many people have. It's the biggest thing I face when I do consulting, is that I'll come up with a plan for a business, and then a month later I'll come back and somebody else said, "Oh, look at this little thing," and now they're over here and they're over there and over there, and they don't. It seems so easy to do. But there's a cost to everything, yeah. Even if it's just a distraction. And so that's my biggest disappointment, is when I do help people come up with a plan and they don't stick to it. All you got to do is stick to that plan, and it is going to work. And it's the same with the known book. I mean, if you follow those 4 steps, I mean, I think that's a hallmark of the people who have been successful in the book is, I mean, they were consistent. They were persistent. They were resilient. And they, you know, the wine blogger or the artist or the educator, or you just go right down the line.
Yeah.
You look at what Pete Matthew is doing with his podcast. You know, he did blogging, he did videos, but boom, he found gold with the podcast. And now he has single-minded focus on growing that podcast, single-minded focus on creating value for the people who are going to buy something from him. And that's a real lesson of the book is this, you know, you got to be consistent. You got to add value for a long period of time. And every time you take a little zig and a zag, you're moving off that path.
Yeah.
You're that 30 months becomes longer because you moved off that path.
I suppose there's the risk as well that if you have been doing it for a while, working on your content, good content, and you do take a zig, you could lose a fair chunk of your audience if they feel that you're moving away from what it is that you've becoming known for in terms of the content you've been producing up to that point, and then you get distracted by whatever VR or whatever, and suddenly it's a bit too much of a veering off from the path that you've been treading that way. So it's it's definitely I will take heed of that. I've already got Cara in the chat box saying that she will hold me accountable, so I best not upset the Queen of Scotland. That's not a good thing to do. But yeah, that's it'll be interesting to see where brands go. Branding is a different thing, and branding is evolving all the time with new technologies and new platforms. So I'm having to keep up with that myself. And so for new businesses, it's something which I think new businesses get too hooked on. They get too hooked on, I need a good logo, rather than thinking about the background stuff, which is actually their brand. How are you going to interact with your customers? Who are your niche? What are your aims? What are your objectives? These are the important things that they need to be building, because really the logo can only come when we know what those are. And something like Known will actually help me at the end of that process. If someone has read this book and gone through all the 4 steps and comes to me with their plan, I'll have a much stronger idea of what I can produce for them in terms of a visual identity to support everything behind that. So it's really interesting the way that it goes. And I think you're right in that the 4 steps are all actionable. There's nothing fluffy there. It won't date. Those rules they'll always be the same, no matter the technology changes. You're still going to have to find your audience and find your niche and use what you love as much as make sure that it's going to make you money and not chase.
Kathleen asks a good question here. She asks, what if you stick to the plan day after day, year to year, and the plan was shit to begin with? And I mean, that's death. Hopefully that's what this book is really about correcting. The worst thing you can do is execute beautifully on a flawed plan. That's exactly what's going to happen, is you're going to just be frustrated. And so, what I hope people will do is look at the book and think it through and have a plan and do a research. And there's no guarantee that it's going to work, but it'll give you the very best chance to succeed. The other thing I have in the book is kind of like this little measurement system. And then there's a workbook that goes with the book that you can download a template to kind of, start keeping track of signs that it's working or it's not working. And basically what I recommend is do it for a year. And if those signs aren't accumulating, then you got to go back and you got to say, maybe the plan is wrong. Maybe the strategy is wrong. Maybe I underestimated the niche. Maybe I judged my audience wrong. Maybe there's not enough people out there who care about what I'm doing. Maybe I need to, spread my net wider. Maybe I'm creating the wrong type of content. It's too crowded. So you need to go back and challenge some of the assumptions. But Kathleen, I think that's a great point and a great question. I didn't want that to go by.
Yeah, thanks for picking that up, Mark. It is important, and I think it is something that a few people will go down and will experience. It doesn't work, and I've been doing what you suggest there for a little while now. I think it was a webinar that you did a few months ago where you did say you should track the things where someone thanks you for releasing a piece of content, and the little things you get invited for. And it's amazing how if you don't do that, you forget these little things. And when I started tracking, it's amazing.
It's just like you mentioned. Someone said they're using your content in a class. Mark that down.
Yeah,
that shows that that the awareness is building. Awareness is the first step. It's awareness leads to engagement and trust. Trust leads to loyalty and purchasing. That's why it takes 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Because there's no shortcut to trust and loyalty. There isn't. You've got to build an emotional connection with your audience over time. And you never know, that teacher, maybe those students, they're going to become your customer someday. Or maybe they're going to subscribe to you and share your content to someone who's going to be a customer someday. So it all adds up, but it starts with awareness. And that counts for something. If your social media audience is growing, that's a sign that your awareness is growing. And in the first year or so, that is a great goal. Get the awareness out there. The awareness, that means you're becoming known. That means that's a great KPI that says I'm on the right track. As long as those things are building, keep going.
Yeah.
Don't pivot. Don't switch. Stay absolutely focused on your message, on your space, on your content, on that audience. It shows that it's working. Because what you look at examples like Pete, who's in the CMA group, nothing was happening, and then all of a sudden it does. It took him 18 months before he had one customer from his podcast. 18 months. But he stayed focused. He stayed consistent. He stuck to his plan. And now, that is his business. So I encourage people to, use that template, track that progress. And the biggest problem is people quit too soon.
Yeah, I think as well, and another thing is to start.
Yeah.
Everyone says, there's no better time to start than now. And I think there's quite a few people in your book who said, please go back and look at my first blog or my first video, and you'll see that it's absolutely awful. But over the years, they improved, they got better, they learned what they were doing. And by years 2 and 3, they'd kind of found their feet and they'd built up the audience. And in a way, their audience had seen them grow as well. And that, I think that almost attaches people closer to you. They can see that they're with you on that journey of self-improvement and knowledge. And I've noticed that as well. I've got some clients who've been with me for a long time, over a decade. And I still get feedback from them on how I've changed as a person, how my knowledge has grown in terms of branding, and how I treat branding differently to the way I did 10 years ago. There's nothing wrong with, I think, increasing your knowledge and that changing how you deliver your content. I think that's an important thing. I don't think you can stay the same. But I think just people need to start. It's one of the things that's the scariest thing to do, is put yourself out there into the public domain, whether that's video, podcast, or blogging. But I think you need to start, and I think you get a nice surprise at the support that you'll get, even if it's not the best. I think you will get good support from people. to keep you going. But I'm very conscious of the time. I hope everyone's got some good stuff from that. I cannot emphasize enough, you need to get this book and read it twice. I'll be going through it for the third time. I've not actually used the workbook yet, so I will be using the workbook. I've just been going through the main book, but I think Cara is probably going to post up a link to the book, which would be UK Amazon. But Mark, do you want to just let people know how else they can find you? Your website and stuff. Let them know how they can link up and read more of your content.
Yeah, I'm at businessesgrow.com, and you can find my podcast and my books and my blog there. And I'm right over there in Scotland in June, and I'm just so happy to be coming back. That I think that was probably my favorite event ever, and I think the reason is because whenever you go to an event, you kind of look around and you think, does anybody know me here? Is anybody, do I have any friends? And the CMA event, it's not just an event, it's a community. And there's just a lot of connection there, a lot of support. And I was immediately brought into the community, and I've had, more collaboration, more connection with the people from CMA than any event I've ever been to. So I would love to see you in June. I'd love to if you're one of my weak relational social media links, I'd love to turn you into a stronger link, an actionable audience, so that maybe you and I can, who knows, we can collaborate someday together on something. And that's how it all works. So I'm going to be over there in June, and I'm going to be there for the whole thing. And I just, want to have a few drinks with you guys and have some fun and have some good conversations and be part of the community.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. It's an entirely different type of conference to anything else that you would go to. Really, it is more of as you say, it's more of a community than just a sit in rows of chairs listening to people talk on stage. It's as much about the bits in between the talks as it is, and also the nightlife as well. I'm sure Cara will agree with me on that one. But yeah, it'd be great to see as many people at CMA in June as possible. Can't wait to meet up with Mark again in person rather than just via camera. And I have one last question, which I think I made Mark aware of by email, and that is this. Because we are Rock Your Brand, we're all about rocking brands. Mark, if there were a rock band to produce an album of your life and achievements, what rock band would you like to record that album for you, alive or dead?
It would be Bruce Springsteen. I love Bruce. I've known I've followed him since he was a kid and I was a kid, and he's just been a huge part of my life. And I love his new book, by the way. It's a huge book, an autobiography, but really it's almost like poetry. It's so well written. It's written like his songs. And I think Bruce is a guy who was kind of a blue collar working class guy that, he struggled, he sacrificed, he suffered along the way. And I relate to that. Bruce was not an overnight success. And I mean, there was a time he was homeless, living under a bridge, and so I can relate to things that he's been through, and I love his music. I love him as a man, and so that's who I would love to work with on an album of my life.
Cool. Well, maybe we can start a little Twitter campaign and get the boss to
good luck with that
album. Yeah.
I'm sure Bruce is just hanging on every
I'm
tweet
sure
about it.
He's itching. I'm sure he's itching. He's one of your blog lurkers, and he just can't wait for that request, Mark. But thank you very much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. I know how busy you are. I know you want to get back to your garden. So get mulching. But thanks very much, Mark. And thanks
everybody
for joining us. And hope you all have a great day. And hopefully see you all in June at CMA.
Take care.
See you later, folks. Stay creative.